Hi, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Encounter Church. We're so glad you joined us today. My name is Chris, and we're happy to serve you this morning. We're going to be singing some songs. You might recognize some, but we'd love it if you stand with us and sing along. When your legs don't work like they used to before, and I can't sweep you off of your feet, will your mouth still remember the taste of my love? Will your eyes still smile from your cheeks? Darling, I will be loving you till we're 70. And baby, my heart is still full as hard at 23. I'm thinking about how people fall in love in mysterious ways. Maybe just a touch of a hand. For me, I fall in love with you every single day. I just wanna tell you I am. So honey, now take me into your loving arms. Kiss me under the light of 1,000 stars. Place your hand on my beating heart. I'm thinking out loud. Maybe we fall in love right where we are. When my hair's all but gone and my memory fades, and the crowds don't remember my name. When my hands don't play strings the same way, I know you will still love me the same. 'Cause honey, your soul it never grows old, it's evergreen. And baby, your smile's forever in my mind and memory. I'm thinking about how people fall in love in mysterious
You are high above them all. For your name stands forever, set apart. You are the victor. You are high above them all. Among the gods, there's no other that compares with your power. You are high above them all. For your name stands forever, set apart. You are the victor. You are high above them all. Our God is like no other, in love, in matchless power. We serve the God of the impossible. Our King, He reigns unrivaled. In strength, He stands unequal. We serve the God of the impossible. Whoa, whoa, we serve the God of the impossible.
And if your car did not start, at least on the first attempt, anybody? Someone's like, so. Yeah, I tell you what, for me, I tried to crank it twice. I said, okay, Lord, I got to go to church today. Not just because I'm a pastor, like I want to be at church today, but it's got to start sometime. So it's kind of cold outside. And I tell you, listen, as in a part of this time, there's so many people who serve and make Encounter Church what it is today. But this morning, I think we should give a shout out. A few of them are in here, but a few of them are not in here. All those people who got up early, really early, to go get the trailers, get the carts. And I looked at them this morning, they said they just wouldn't move. I'm like, I'm telling the cart to move, and they just wouldn't move. Let's give a shout out to them. I felt bad for them. And I said, they did take a little hot water. They had fun today. They took some hot water out just a few moments ago, threw it in the air, made snow, because that happens, because when it's this cold, those type of crazy things happen. So listen, if you're a guest with us, we want to know who you are. Not just meet you, but really connect with you, hopefully get a little information so we can keep you posted as to what Encounter Church is going to be doing in the future and communicate with you about the exciting things that are coming in 2016. So if you are a guest, I want you to take just a few moments to either fill out the connection card that you got when you came in the door in the handout, or you can download our app on your smartphone, encounterchurch.com/app, or search for it on your smartphone. Fill out the connection card in the app. We'd love to know that you're here. We'd love to follow up with you. Once again, thanks for being here at Encounter Church. We hope you enjoy the rest of our service this morning.
Water you turn into wine. Open the eyes of the blind. There's no one like you. None like you. Into the darkness you shine. Out of the ashes we rise. There's no one like you. None like you. Our God is greater, our God is stronger. God, you are higher than any other. Our God is healer, awesome in power. Our God our God. Into the darkness you shine, out of the ashes we rise. There's no one like you, none like you. Our God is greater, our God is stronger. God, you are higher than any other. Our God is healer, awesome in power. Our God, our God. Our God is greater, our God is stronger. God, you are higher than any other. Our God is healer, awesome in power. Our God, our God. And if our God is for us, then who could ever stop us? And if our God is with us, then what could stand against? And if our God is for us, then who could ever stop us? And if our God is with us, then what could stand against? Then what could stand against? Our God is greater, our God is stronger. God, you are higher than any other. Our God is healer, awesome in power. Our God, our God. Our God is greater, our God is stronger. God, you are higher than any other. Our God is healer, awesome in power. Our God, our God. And if our God is for us, then who could ever stop us? And if our God is with us, then what can stand against? And if our God is for us, then who could ever stop us? And if our God is with us, then what can stand against? Then what can stand against? Our God is greater, our God is stronger. God, you are higher than any other. Our God is healer, awesome in power. Our God, our God. Our God is greater, our God is stronger. God, you are higher than any other. Our God is healer, awesome in power. Our God, our God.
Two beat up souls driving through the night in the 95 Chevrolet with the hatch down. Hey, now take my hand and give me those eyes. Don't stop the beat of the full heart inside of me. Oh, I got a full heart. And I'm not afraid to stop. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Good morning. My name is Chris Causey. I am the lead pastor here at Encounter Church, and I'm glad you're here. It's an incredible day. We're in the midst of a 4-week series. At Encounter Church, we will take an idea or maybe a conflict or a point of tension in our lives, and we will, over the course of 4 weeks or 5 weeks in a month, we will take a look at what God has to say about that specific issue, tension point. We'll unpack it, spend 4 or 5 weeks just looking at it from different angles. And this is the month of love, right? This is February. And so in the month of February, over the course of this month, we're unpacking relationships. And then one of the things that I've said even last week was that recognize for some of us, we're in different stages. Some are single, some are working through a tension point right now in your relationship, whether you're married or dating. And for some of us, we're coming through a divorce or on the backside, wondering if you're ever going to love again. And that this series is meant to affect all of our lives because relationship dynamics are the same. No matter what specific relationship, the dynamics of relationships are the same. The love thing just complicates it a little bit more. There's a little bit more emotion. There's a little bit more tension. There's a little bit more expectation. But the same reality, the same dynamics that will make your relationships with love better are going to make your friendships better, are going to make your relationship with your coworkers better. And so if you didn't kind of catch in last week, if you weren't here, if this is your first time, this week on our app, in iTunes, we'll have last week's message up. And so you can watch the entire service last week, or you can just listen to the message. But I would encourage you to go back and check into it, because what we did last week is we kind of laid the groundwork and said, we need to grow in our love. We need to really define what love is if we're going to have a conversation about love. And that sets the stage over the next 3 weeks of really diving into our relationships and looking at it primarily through 3 different distinct lenses. One is through our past. One is through the present, which is next week, where we'll talk about conflict and how do you fight in a way that's fighting for the relationship, not fighting and destroying the relationship. And then what does it look like with the last week of the series, to go for the long haul? Because no one stands in front of that person and say, man, I really hope we don't work out. I really hope that in about 7 to 8 years I destroy this thing and that we hate each other for the next few decades. Like, no one writes that on their life goals list, right? But the reality is that that getting to the end of your life and having that person there with you in a relationship that has been vibrant and growing, you don't drift into that. That's a hard thing to get to. And over that last series, we're going to talk and unpack that. What I want to do today is really dive into that first lens of the past. Some of you, for those who've been here before, you've kind of heard me share a little bit of my story. I worked with students for about 10 plus years. And I was a student pastor. It was a fairly large student ministry. And one of the things that we did then that we still do now as a church is we did community service projects. And even as a student pastor, I believe the students should see that their lives were meant to be for people, not about what they could get from them. And so one of those ridiculous ways of accomplishing that was to take 70 middle school and high school students to New York City to do community service projects throughout New York City. We would just break into different groups, do inner city work in some really poor areas. We would work along some churches doing community events in some more middle class arenas. And through the midst of that, we learned some things about logistics. Taking 70 or 80 middle school, high school students to New York City is quite a feat, and it's terrifying. And so one year, as we were getting better processing through it, we were like, you know what? The finances could be cheaper if we brought our own cook. And so we had this facility rented with a kitchen, and we're like, let's bring our own cook. We could cut the cost for the trip so we can have more students come. And so we decided we're going to fly because there was such a drastic cost difference. We didn't have to take a bus. It was cheaper to fly. So I'm really concerned because I'm thinking all the conversations I have with parents with, yes, your son is currently in federal custody because of TSA or some statement that was made. So I decided, I put all my leaders kind of dispersed through the group, and I was going to be the last person to walk the group through TSA. And with each student that passes through, and then there's, of course, those students that you aren't sure are going to make it through because you're like, what did they pack, right? With each student that passed through, I'm like, okay. And then we get to the last two, and they're leaders. They're the oldest ones on the trip with us. And wife makes it through. And then husband starts to go through, and beep, 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 beep. They bring him back, pull something out of his bag, take something off of him, send him back through. His bag goes back through again. TSA agent brings him back. They get something out of his bag again. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I wasn't prepared to call a 60-year-old mother and say, hey, like your son is in federal custody because he is trying to smuggle illegal items onto an airplane, because this is his carry-on. And these are significant things that you're like, why is that in there? Right? This is a 60-year-old man I'm having this conversation with. So we finally get through, make it to the airplane. We sit down. We shuttle them through the subway system. Everything's smooth. Then we get, they're settled. We walk into the kitchen, and the conversation with the cook and I, we're starting to process logistics for the week. And he says, we start laughing. And I was like, man, I wasn't sure you're going to make it through. Right? I just got to be honest. And we were laughing about it because I was concerned the middle schoolers weren't going to make it through. And so we're laughing and we're joking. And he's kind of pivots, and we start talking about cooking. And he pulls out his bag that he had with him on the plane. And he's like, oh, yeah, let me take care of that. And he pulls out scissors. And I know that this may not look big, but this is what I saw when he pulled it out. Because I was like, what in the... You brought that on a plane? And was this wrong? I'm like, yes, that's wrong. That's illegal. You don't bring something, but in my head, this is what I'm seeing, right? Because this is what a TSA agent would have seen. But in the midst of pulling all the other illegal contraband out of his luggage, they missed this dagger, right? And in the midst of doing that, I realized some things that went far beyond just packing for a trip. I think there's a reason that in relationships, we call what people smuggle from their past into the present baggage, right? And that many of us can connect with the fact that we think in our vetting process, that if I do a good job in dating, I'll catch all of the little tiny things. And that for some of us who have had conversations with, some of you get into a serious relationship, and in the midst of all the vetting, you were just like that cook. There's some things you found and you worked through, but then about 3 years into the marriage, something else shows up. And you're like, where did that come from? And it got smuggled in. See, all of us bring baggage into our relationship. Baggage isn't something that we're exempt from. It's not all bad. Some of it's good. But every one of us, when we step into a relationship, bring our past with us. That our past, yours and theirs, is really important to the future of your relationship. Right? And banks get that. Employers get that. Utility companies, cell phone companies, they all understand that the best predictor of your future is your past. They screen for it, they ask questions, they run credit checks. And all of this is about, if I look at and I'm diligent enough about researching their past, it'll help me figure out what they're going to do in the future. Because the best predictor of your future is your past. But I think sometimes in relationships, we forget that. In the midst of love, and we're the exception, because everyone's love story is the exception to the rule. Right? Well, he doesn't have a job, but we love each other. I remember my wife's father taking me to dinner when I asked permission to marry his daughter. I was a little old school in that regard, and said, I'd really like your blessing. And I was in grad school, and he said, you don't have insurance. What are you going to do if she gets pregnant? We love each other. It's not a problem. We've got love. And he's like, but you don't have insurance. That's a problem. Like, we got love, right? We all think that we've got love and that makes us the exception. We love each other. I know that he's never finished anything a day in his life, but we've got love. And what ends up happening is completely ignore the past. But I would argue that the unresolved past will always be present in our relationships. And that if we don't work through our past will continue to work through us. And Solomon, who is one of the wisest men who ever lived, knew that. He understood that. And in the midst of writing a book that was essentially a parenting guide, a collection of phrases and statements that he told his sons growing up, the book of Proverbs, he gives this one simple statement, just a handful of words, that was just loaded with implications and meaning. It's a proverb that I think, while it could apply to multiple areas of life, the areas of relationship and baggage, it's actually really helpful. It's Proverbs 14:8. If you have the Encounter Church app and the sermon notes, it'll already be loaded for you. If you don't have that with you, we're going to have it on the screen. But it says this, that the wisdom of the prudent is to give thought to their ways, but the folly of fools is deception. Here's what I love about Proverbs is if you read the introduction to the book of Proverbs, it tells you that part of the challenge of a proverb is that on the surface, it may seem so general, it has no particular meaning at all to anything specific. But a proverb, according to the introduction, is meant to be thought about. It's meant to be processed. It's meant to be reflected upon, because a proverb's like a riddle. The truth is hidden inside of it so that you have to think about it. And the more you think about it, the more you see its application. And that some of my favorite Bible passages, some of the most helpful passages for me in my life, come from the book of Proverbs. I didn't grow up in a household where I got a lot of wisdom from my father, kind of role sitting down. And so for me as an adult, I go to the Proverbs regularly, just circling things and being like, okay, today I'm going to think about this one. And as I go through my day or as I go through my week, I find different application points or different areas where it comes true. And this one, I think, really does, it's very similar. The more you dig into this, the more you reflect on it, the more you realize its implications, specifically to this area of past. In fact, I think as we process through this proverb, we're going to find that there are two critical things that you and I have to do if we're going to become aware and start to break free from our past being present, working through us in our relationships. The first thing he says is that the wisdom of the prudent is to give thought to their ways. So you see in this proverb two distinct groups. You've got the prudent and you've got the fool. Right? And the prudent is just a fancy word, someone who's forward-looking, they're wise, they're processing, they know where they want to go. And so the prudent is kind of held up as an example in the book of Proverbs. It's what Solomon's telling his sons they should become. And there's oftentimes the anti-vision of what to become, which is the fool. Of like, this is what, if you don't do this, this is what happens. This is the other side, the foolish side. And the first principle is where he says, give thought to their ways. He's like, look, here's the wisdom point, what the prudent does. The prudent reflect on their life. They reflect on where they've come from in the midst of where they're trying to go. I would say it this way, that in the area of relationships, specifically regarding our past, that we have to recognize that there is a default that we all bring into our relationship. You and I all have a default setting. And that our default setting for relationships, right, you don't walk into any relationship neutral. You bring with you your past. And inside of your past is a default way of doing things relationally. And I would say that there are two critical components inside our default setting. That our default setting comes from what was caught from the example of our parents and what we were taught from experiences with other people. And that those two are the parallel tracks in which this relational train called our default runs on. What we caught, your mom, your dad, right, never sat you down and say, I want you to realize that people aren't trustworthy. Right? They never said, hey, I want you to understand the way you deal with conflict is passive aggressiveness. You just caught that. You watched it. It was the example. And you mimic it. And then as you move out of home and you get out on your own, then you start to have these experiences with other people. And those experiences with other people begin to teach you some things. Well, I guess it's just me. And no one else is going to take care of me. I'm on my own. No one else is going to care about what I care about. And you start to kind of put these things together, and they slowly start to creep into our lives and become the default. And what ends up happening is that if you could kind of peep in, I would say that the simple gist of it, if you were to peep into relationships, and it is a little bit like this, trying to break in, that you realize that your default is, I think, in 3 different arenas. The first is in the area of assumptions, right? We all bring this into our relationship. We have assumptions that we caught and that we've been taught. Well, you know what? I watched my dad. I watched how he walked out on me. And I guess you just can't depend on people. People aren't trustworthy. People are going to let you down. So I got to keep my guard up. And that you go into this relationship with assumptions that they just don't last. Because you watched your parents go through a divorce. Or because you were abused. You internalized a distorted picture of relationships. And that those things are caught. No one ever sat you down, took notes, and said, here's what you need to realize. People will let you down and walk out on you. But you caught it. And those assumptions go down and start to affect how you operate. They start to affect how you interact with people. And it's not all faulty or damaging assumptions. Some of them are healthy assumptions. We all bring assumptions into our relationship. We all have unspoken expectations that we bring into our relationship. Most of the time, the disappointments we experience in our relationships, the frustration in our relationships, are about these unspoken expectations or these unspoken assumptions that we just thought would play out or not play out. And conflict arises because they bump up against this invisible thing called the assumptions. Henry Winkler, for all of his impact on life, the one statement that he said, besides A, that I think is most profound is this, that assumptions can be the termites of relationships. Right? That many of us have experienced where the unspoken, the assumed, starts to erode the relationship. And that if we're going to work through our default, that we have to realize it's not just our assumptions, but that our assumptions start to color our attitudes. You grow up in what you get caught, and then what happens to you and what you get taught starts to color your attitudes in life. And you have enough people treat you certain ways that you become unforgiving and distant. You're like, man, people are just out to break my heart. And you go into your relationship with this attitude, with this bitterness, holding and clinging on to, trying to preserve. We've all met people who are distant in relationships, and it's that they're bringing all of the past brokenness into it. And there's this attitude of just distant because if I get too close to you, if I let my guard down, you might hurt me. I might not be able to make it through. Or jealousy, right? If you watch, maybe you caught your parents and there's an element of literally you caught one of your parents. I was dealing with that this week. Of someone who found out their dad's having an affair and they read the text message and they're processing what to do with mom because mom doesn't know. And here's a 16-year-old girl who's concerned she's going to be the reason that she breaks up her parents if she says something to her mom. I'm like, it's not your fault. But that affects. And that'll carry into her future relationships. And this attitude manifested through jealousy of where were you last night? Well, let me see your phone. What were you doing? You don't trust people because you're not sure, are they trying to trick me? Are they trustworthy? Or maybe it's just bitterness. Maybe it's a health. Maybe you're trusting. You grew up in a healthy context and you saw 2 parents that loved each other and you've had positive dating relationships and you really do. You have the benefit of the doubt you give people. You're sincere and trusting to them and you're like, you bring this healthy attitude into relationships and you're like, I don't understand the person I'm dating because I've never done anything. But there's suspicion and there's distrust and I can't figure it out. Or maybe you're in a relationship and you see passive aggressiveness. Someone grew up in a home and what they got caught was people not dealing with conflict. If there's conflict, we're not going to talk about it. It's going to stay underneath the surface. We're going to let it kind of simmer for a week. And then one day I come home and mom and dad are okay again. Right? Or everybody seems all right. I don't know what happened. They never talked about it. It just kind of lingered underneath the surface. And you caught that. And you bring that same passive-aggressive attitude in the way you interact with your partner now. And that you don't want to talk about it. You want to avoid it. But it still sneaks out. And then ultimately, that our attitudes, because they start to affect our actions. And this could be positive, healthy, the way that I call it and taught encouragement. Like I just get that you should affirm one another and you should encourage someone and you should build them up. And that's the way I'm going to do it. That comes out of my assumptions and my attitude. My action is I'm going to be encouraging with my words. Or it may be demoralizing speech or verbal abuse because that's what you grew up with. Or maybe because you grew up with nothing, all you have is the supposed actions of the exact opposite. You're like, well, I don't know what it looks like because I didn't have a healthy picture, but I'm going to swing to the opposite side. So that means my actions, because I'm so afraid of conflict, I'm going to run over my partner every time there's an issue. Like a good friend of mine who early in their relationship, he was so determined that they were never going to have conflict that gets unresolved that he would beat down the door and remove the door from the hinges in order to have the conversation with his spouse who was hiding in the bathroom from him. And we're not going to have conflict. And that these come out of these default actions. And maybe it's, you have to be right. Right? You always have to be right in every argument. You can never be wrong. Or maybe you're okay with being wrong, but you got to have the last word. And it's like, all right, we're done. But. You got to slide it in there because you got to justify it. Oh, I'm just clarifying. I'm just trying to understand. But that default of I got to be right, I got to get the last word, or it's just selfish actions. What you were taught is it's all about me. And I'm the king of this castle, I'm the queen of this castle, and everything revolves around me. And you bring that into your relationship. That all of us bring this stuff, it's baggage. And you may be thinking, well, I'm only like that because of them. Maybe I hit a nerve. But here's the thing I want you to realize. You're not like that because of that person in your life. A bridge can have a hairline fracture. And people can walk across that bridge every single day. But the moment a large truck drives across it, the bridge collapses. That truck didn't make the bridge collapse. It was already unstable. It already had the weakness there. It just took something heavy and significant to expose it. And love relationships are significant things. And these defaults that we may be able to manage and to keep hidden from most people, when it comes to something as significant as your spouse or your children, your defaults get exposed every single time. And it's not their fault that it was exposed. It's yours. It's been there all along. But see, that's where the deception comes in, because what happens is if we're not aware, we start to shift our focus off of this and we blame the other people because that's their fault that I'm like this. Well, if they didn't make me so mad, I wouldn't fly off the handle. Right? Well, if they were willing to deal with conflict, maybe I wouldn't have to be passive aggressive. It's like, no, you have a default setting and all they're doing is revealing it. But deception keeps us from seeing it. And so what do you do with the default? Well, the idea that he uses the word ways is, I think, significant. Because ways implies movement. Ways implies direction. See, here's the thing about defaults. If we don't resolve, process, and recognize our defaults, then we will continue to repeat them. And some of you can look at your relationships and you can see that. You see a pattern. And the pattern isn't because of them, it's because of your defaults. And so what do you do when you recognize your defaults? Well, you have a choice. You can repeat them or you can replace them. But most of us, we fall into this trap of deception and we say that, you know what? I'm going to promise my way out of the past. Oh, we're just not working. You know what we need to do? Let's move in together. Well, we're not working. You know what we need to do? We need to take our relation to let's get married. Our marriage is struggling. We need to have kids. And we double down. And we expect that somehow in doubling down, we're going to promise our way out of the past. And you can't promise your way out of the past. You repeat the past if you try to promise your way out. But all of us have fallen trapped. I've fallen trapped to it of saying, babe, I'm so sorry, I'll never spend that much again. I'll never drink that much again. I'll never go there again. I'll never talk to her or him again. We make promises. But promises are not powerful enough to overcome the past. Promises don't move us past our past. Decisions do. That we have to realize that there has to be an intentional replacement. And here's a subtle study that I think points to this. There was a massive study done on customer service call agents. Because believe it or not, that's a really, that's a high turnover job. And so they were trying to figure out, why is there a small subset of customer service agents who somehow seem to rise above the fray? They're happier with their job, they stay longer, they seem to have better ratings from people who interact with them. And you think about it, these people are doing one of the most difficult jobs. They're not the reason the company has made the mistake. They're the person who's answering the phone, getting blasted with all the reasons that their company who's paying them is just the worst company ever, after they've been on hold for 35 minutes being told that we value you, right? Oh, we value you. We're going to make you whole for 45 minutes. And then this poor person picks up the phone. You're frustrated. You're angry. You're contemplating going and creating another cable company because you want to stick it to Verizon so bad. You're like, man, if I had enough free time, I'd start another one and I'd bring them down. Right? And they get all the fury of it. And yet there's a small group of them, roughly 20, 25%, that seem to do better than the other 75%. And so they set out to try to figure out what it was that they did that made them so unique. And they kept diving deeper and deeper and deeper into their background, into their training. It wasn't just one company. It was this group across every company. They're like, what in the world makes them different? And then one of the researchers had this crazy idea to say, well, we collected every data point we can. Let's look at the computers and the technology they used. And so they start to dive in, and they notice this weird trait that they all had in common. They almost wanted to kind of dismiss it, but they kept seeing this pattern in all of this group. And the pattern was this, that they had a different browser on their computer than what came default installed when they were given it at their job. And that realization that this subgroup had a different browser led them on the path to realizing that the reason people were able to be happier in their job, took less sick days, got higher customer service ratings, wasn't because they used Firefox or Chrome. It was because they brought a mindset in that said, if I don't like the default, I don't have to be stuck with it. I can replace it. And they would go on their own and download a new operating browser, like a new Internet Explorer. And I think Solomon was picking up on what took those researchers thousands of data points to discover. And that the wisdom of the prudent is that they give thought to where they've come from and where they want to go. And that you and I can make a difference and make a choice, not just to repeat our past, but to replace it, to replace the defective parts of our past for something better. That's God's intention for relationships and marriage, is that we would become better together. That if you're willing to go into the relationship, the same mindset that those customer call agents had, of, you know what, I have a choice. Just because this is what I got dealt doesn't mean I have to deal with it. I can do something about it. The fool just says, well, I can't, I'm stuck. But the prudent says, I have a choice in what I do.